When I stepped outside, the leaves were crackling with the bright colors of autumn. The cool October air stung my face slightly, making it tingle like it wasn't mine. Looking up, I noticed a man standing in front of me, wearing a long coat adorned with playful polka dots. His hands were shoved in his pockets, and our eyes met for a moment before he disappeared into the bustling crowd. I swiftly turned on my heels and walked away, hunched my shoulders, accidentally bumping into passersby on the crowded sidewalk. Sorry, I repeated like a broken record. Seeking refuge, I walked into the nearest cafe, which, not surprisingly, turned out to be my usual habitat. I sat at the window and stared out at the street, breathing heavily and unevenly. I gazed out into the sea of faces, looking for the mystery man. Suddenly, there was a loud clang of shattering glass that made me jump out of my skin. "Oh my God!" exclaimed Julia, one of the cafe's servers. She knelt down on the polished wooden floor, deftly picking up the shards of a broken mug. "Let me help," she offered kindly. "Thanks," I replied, placing the broken mug on a tray, which she carried victoriously into the back room. A bell jingled in the cafe, and I adjusted my blue jeans, glancing back. A man in a long coat stood there, his hand disappearing into his pocket, and his penetrating gaze seemed to dig into my soul. I took a step back, my voice trembling, and he stepped closer. "What do you want?" I asked, trembling with excitement. He answered nothing, only shortened the distance until I had no room to retreat. "I know what you did," his deep voice, even barely above a whisper, sent shivers down my spine. His face was a few centimeters from mine, his eyes dark and devoid of life. He squeezed my hand and I cried out, but the other visitors remained impassive. He led me outside, onto a noisy street. I looked around, but everyone was engrossed in their phones, oblivious to my distress, anxiety, and fear. "One more word and you'll be sorry," he warned, interrupting my constant pleas for help with disgust. He opened the door of his sinister van and without the slightest remorse shoved me inside and then slammed it shut, leaving me no opportunity to protest. I didn't know where we were going, but I could feel the roughness of the unfinished road. The one that struck me most was a pothole that almost gave me a flat tire. Suddenly, we came to an abrupt stop. A man got out of the car and disappeared from view for at least 15 seconds before opening the door and grabbing my arm with such force that it felt like he could twist it out of its socket. We were standing outside a massive white building surrounded by a menacing barbed wire fence. He led me through a cavernous tunnel that led to double doors, beside which stood a colossal figure. "I have found the last one," the man in the long coat announced, and the massive figure stepped aside without a word. Beyond the doors stretched an endless corridor surrounded by numerous closed doors. We came to a third door, which swung open, and he ushered me inside. "Stay," was his only instruction, after which he closed the door with force. I looked around the room. There was a weathered wooden table in the center, 2 chairs on either side, cameras in each corner, and a small red light above the door signaling the presence of an almost invisible camera. I tried to turn the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge, securely locked. Although it felt like I had been in there for ages, it had probably been no more than 30 minutes. Suddenly, a frail, blonde-haired woman with a serious expression burst into the room. She was dressed in a dark blue suit with a white button-down shirt and was holding a red folder labeled "Confidential." She deliberately pulled up a chair across from me and sat down. She placed the folder on the desk and opened it. "Riley Jefferson, is that you?" I swallowed and nodded. She looked up, then back to the folder. Wetting her fingers, she began flipping through the pages, a process that seemed to take forever. Finally, she looked up and announced, "It's time to take you to your room." Before I could comprehend her words, a man in a long coat yanked me out of the room like I was a rag doll. As we stood in front of the bright red door, an impatient woman loomed behind us. "Open up," she shouted. The man in leather gloves gradually reached for the handle, and the door creaked open, flooding the room with fluorescent light. As my vision refocused, I saw 6 more people inside, shivering from the cold as the woman and man stepped inside. All of them were dressed in black and white striped clothes, hands tied, about the same age, about 20 years old. The first of them was of Caucasian nationality. I was led into the room with the others. My heart pounded with fear and the unknown. Behind us came a woman who appeared to be in charge, and a man in a long coat. They were all dressed in identical black and white striped suits, their hands still shackled. They looked to be about the same age, in their early 20s, and the first of them was of Caucasian descent. The room was cold and gloomy, the bright fluorescent light illuminating every detail. The woman who had been leafing through the folder before now took matters into her own hands. She positioned herself across from me and placed a red folder labeled confidential on the desk. With a leisurely motion, she opened it, exposing a series of documents. Riley Jefferson, she began, her voice serious and composed. Is that your name? I swallowed hard and nodded, excitement building with every second. She cast a brief glance upward, then turned back to the folder. Moistening her fingers, she began flipping through the pages again. Minutes dragged on as she studied the contents, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up and said, "It's time to take you to your room." Before I could fully comprehend her words, a man in a long coat yanked me out of the room, grabbing my arm tightly. We stood in front of a bright red door, behind which the woman waited impatiently. "Open up," she barked. The man in leather gloves slowly reached for the doorknob and opened it with a creak, letting a blinding stream of fluorescent light into the room. Adjusting my vision, I saw 6 other people shivering from the cold, just like us. A woman and a man entered the room, and I noticed that they were all dressed in black and white striped clothing and their hands were shackled. They were about the same age, in their early 20s, and the first of them was of Caucasian ethnicity. The situation was becoming increasingly disconcerting. I couldn't understand why we were all here, dressed like prisoners, and seemingly under the control of these mysterious figures. The room felt tense. We were waiting for further instructions, our fates hanging in the balance. There was an eerie silence in the room, broken only by the distant hum of the fluorescent lights. We exchanged uncertain glances, questions and fear swirling in our heads. The woman who was in charge here stepped forward and addressed us. "You all got here for a reason," she said, her voice smooth but filled with an air of mystery. "You are now participants in a unique experiment that will challenge your understanding of the world and your own abilities." A general murmur of confusion and apprehension swept through the group. The man in the long cloak who had brought me here stood in the background, his imposing presence a constant reminder of our captivity. The woman continued, "In this place, trials and tests await you that will push you to your limits. You will have to face your deepest fears and uncover your hidden strengths. But remember, what matters most is cooperation." As her words hung in the air, I exchanged a glance with the others, and uncertainty was reflected on our faces. It was clear that we had no choice but to participate in whatever strange experiment they had planned for us. The woman's gaze stopped on me, and she said, "Riley Jefferson, you will be in Group A, follow me." I didn't know what awaited me, but I had a feeling that this was just the beginning of a journey into the unknown, full of challenges, mystery, and a deep sense of unease. And so, as the red door closed behind me, I stepped into the mysterious world that lay ahead, with a heavy heart and trepidation, but with a glimmer of determination in my eyes. Our strange and unsettling journey was just beginning, and none of us knew where it would lead or what secrets we would discover in this hidden place.